June 9th, 68 AD, and Roman Emperor Nero has just killed himself. Why? Because the Roman Senate had proclaimed him an enemy of the state and ordered his execution. Wait, he killed himself because somebody wanted to kill him? What? Okay, in reality, it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, Nero by now had become somewhat unpopular around Rome, especially with the aristocracy, as Nero didn't much care for their opinion, being the spoiled brat he was. Someone who especially hated Nero, however, was a certain Vindex, legate of Gallia Lugdunensis, and he was plotting a coup to remove Nero as emperor. However, all those he reached out to refused to join him. Well, all except one, Galba, governor of Hispania, who also really despised Nero, and after much encouragement by Vindex, proclaimed himself emperor, starting a mass revolt across the western portion of the empire. Now, you might be thinking that things couldn't get any worse for Nero, but you'd be wrong. Very, very wrong. You see, a few months before, in the year 66, Nero had raised the taxes on the Jews living in Judea to tyrannical proportions. The Jews then, because of this, started protesting paying their taxes. Seeing this, the Roman governor of Judea ordered that the Temple of Jerusalem be looted out of its treasury to make up the lost revenue, and anyone who tried to stop them would be crucified, including several holy men. Seeing their Holy of Holies defied in such a way, Judea quickly fell into violence and revolution, with many Roman government officials and even the Jewish king fleeing the province. The Romans tried sending an army to restore control over Jerusalem, but they were ambushed at a place called Bethlehem. Soon, the whole of Judea was revolting. Nero, by now completely losing his mind, sent a veteran general by the name of Vespasian to put down the revolt, who promptly set off to Judea with his son Titus. It was actually kind of odd for Nero to pick Vespasian out of all people for such an important job, as Nero was kinda pissed at him. Why? Well, because a few months before, Vespasian had, no joke, fallen asleep during one of Nero's lyre performances. Anyways, back to the west. So as Vindex was ironically besieging his old capital city, an army loyal to Nero led by Germanic governor Rufus caught up to him. Vindex tried to convince them to join him, but his army refused and Vindex just got himself killed. Kinda. It's complicated. Rufus's men then tried to proclaim him emperor, but he refused. Meanwhile, Galba was marching from Hispania all the way to Italy in what was later dubbed a long and bloody march by historians, as Galba killed anyone who dared not recognize him as the legitimate emperor. Galba also brought with him a young man called Odfo, governor of Lusitania. Keep this guy in mind, he'll be important later. As Galba arrived in northern Italy, and Nero's grasp on power became weaker and weaker, Nero's Praetorian Guard started to plot something. They thought that if we switch sides to Galba, maybe we could get our hands on some bribes. And so, the Praetorians, the emperor's personal bodyguards, abandoned their emperor. Soon after, the Senate proclaimed Galba the legitimate emperor and Nero an enemy of the state. Not having any support left to his name, Nero committed suicide, ending the dynasty started all the way back by Augustus. Thanks, kid. Soon after, Galba arrived in Rome and was officially made emperor. This man only lasted 7 months. Galba becoming emperor was a pretty big deal, as he was the first Roman emperor to not be a part of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. But anyways, as you could probably tell by now, Galba wasn't really the nicest guy around. He was a strict disciplinarian and would kill anyone who didn't show him absolute loyalty, along with their wives and children. In one case, while he was still marching towards Rome, he decimated a legion of ex-sailors because it didn't show him enough respect. By the way, if you're wondering if those Praetorians got those so well-deserved bribes, no, they didn't. Which really pissed him off. It pissed him off so much to the point where the Praetorian prefect Sabianus, now married to Nero's old femboy wife, Sporus, tried to claim he was the bastard son of Caligula and take the emperorship for himself. Can you guess what happened to him? Still, Galba was now emperor, and he had work to do. First thing he did was to remove anyone he perceives as a threat from power, most notably poor old Rufus, who was replaced by a certain fatso by the name of Atellus as Germanic governor. Keep this guy in mind. Galba also brought back from exile a Gallic general by the name of Primus, and put him in charge of the legions in the Danube. Also, keep this guy in mind. Next up, Galba had to deal with the now horrible economy and the empty treasury. You can blame Nero for that. He went about this by raising taxes, economic reform, cutting public welfare, and also stopping Nero's persecution of Christians, as it was really expensive and not accomplishing much. And none of these methods really worked. Wop wop. So it is now the 1st of January, 69 AD, and this is where the real chaos can begin. You see, most people were fine with Galba as emperor, all except one group, the legions in Germania. Why? Because of a grudge they held on him from 20 years ago. So stupid. So when they received the news that Galba was now emperor, they immediately revolted, declaring their governor Vitellius as emperor. Vitellius thought about it for 3 seconds, and then accepted, revolting and soon starting to march to Rome. When Galba learned of the revolt, he panicked. Knowing he didn't have much time left, he needed to pick an heir. This is where Otfo comes into the picture. You see, since Galba was childless and, old, and since he was good friends with Galba, Otfo thought that logically, he would be chosen to become emperor after Galba's death. So, imagine his shock when Galba actually picked some other guy called Lucius instead of him as his heir. And Otfo was outraged. So he went over to the Praetorians, who were still really upset about not getting those so well-deserved bribes. And Otfo came to them with a proposition. Make me emperor, and I will give you all that cash you so want. And you know those greedy little Praetorians jumped on board. And so, the Praetorians murdered Galba. That's our first emperor down. And Otfo was made emperor. This man only lasted 3 months. You know, when Otfo was still a teen, he was a close friend to a teenage Nero. Well, that wasn't until Nero stole Otfo's wife, Pompeia, for himself and exiled him to a governorship in Lusitania. But look at him now, Emperor of Rome. Too late to save Pompeia, though. Firstly, he fulfilled his promise to the Praetorians and gave them all that cash they so wanted. Actually, that was his whole governing strategy. He just threw money at everything. But with that all settled, Otfo could finally put in place his great ideas to better the empire, and that's when he remembered. Vitellius was still revolting, and he managed to capture the whole of Gaul and Britain, and was inching closer and closer to Italy. And not just that, but Otfo finally found out just how awful the economy was, and that all his rapid spending had just made it worse. And to add even more insult to injury, he learned that the war in Judea hasn't been going as planned. Speaking of which, let's check up on what's been happening in Judea. So while that whole mess was going on in Italy, Vespasian had been rampaging through the northern Judean region of Galilee, concluding with the capture and subsequent annihilation of the city of Jodfat. There, Vespasian saw that the entire city's leadership had committed suicide in a cave, all except 2 men, one of which was a certain Josephus, the commander of Galilee. Instead of being instantly executed, Josephus kinda betrayed his fellow Jews and joined up with the Romans, after saying something along the lines of, "Yo, I had this dream where you'd become emperor. Isn't that a prophecy or something, right? Crazy, huh?" What? Yeah! And that's how he was allowed to join up with Rome. Josephus would later become a historian, and he is our primary source about all this Jewish mayhem. Anyways, after joining up with Titus, who, by the way, was dating the Jewish queen of all people, he started to march south towards Jerusalem, ravaging the land as his army moved. I would also like to mention that Vespasian wasn't just destroying for the sake of destroying. He would be somewhat merciful to cities that gave up without a fight. Back in Jerusalem, you'd assume the Jews would be trying to figure out ways to fight back against the Romans, but you'd be very wrong. Again. You see, while the Jews were busy fighting the Romans, they were also busy fighting each other. The different Jewish factions hated each other and there was constant violence in the streets. At the start of the revolt, the Jews created the Judean provincial government, which was led by these three clowns, who were all dead by now after an event called the Zealot Temple Siege, which after the Zealots took over Jerusalem. By now, a guy called Simon had somewhat restored order to the city, with the somewhat being emphasized. For these reasons, Vespasian decided not to immediately march on Jerusalem, letting the Jews weaken themselves first, to the dismay of Titus, who really wanted to see some action. But for now, Vespasian had to sit and wait. By now, the news of Nero, Galba, and Otho finally reached him, all at once. So, anyone can be emperor now, huh? Anyone that's powerful and popular enough. I'm powerful and popular. And what was that whole prophecy from Josephus all about? Could I be emperor? Nah, that's silly. Unless... Anyways, back to Rome. So by now, Otho had finally realized that overthrowing an emperor was a whole lot easier than actually being one. Even so, it was still his duty as emperor to lead his people and bravely defend them in situations like this. And he intended to do it in the bravest way he knew how. By writing a letter asking Vitellius to stop. Great. Okay, what the letter actually said was that if Vitellius stopped rebelling, Otho would marry his daughter, letting Vitellius have political power. Vitellius, disagreed. Well, so much for diplomacy. This one was going to be decided in the battlefield. Fortunately for Otho, he had two veteran generals in Rome at the time. Pallianus, who was a pretty good general, and Titianus, who was a not-so-pretty-good general. Otho went along with them with 2 legions to meet Vitellius' army in northern Italy. Side note, I heard somewhere that Otho married Taurus, but I couldn't find any evidence of that, so whatever. Oh, also another thing, the Danubian legions led by Primus also sided with Otho, but since they were so far away, there wasn't much they could do. Anywho, Otho and Vitellius' armies met in a place called Bedriacum. Vitellius wasn't present himself, instead sending the generals Caecina and the sickly Fabius to lead his army. In the first day of battle, Paulinus managed to hold the line and push the enemy to the nearby town of Cremona. But when leadership passed to Titianus the next day, he decided to be stupid, get off his perfectly good defensive position, and charge the enemy like an absolute madman, getting absolutely destroyed, making the first battle of Bedriacum a Vitellius victory. After hearing of the defeat, Otho was devastated. As he sat in his tent that night, he thought to himself, "Oh, all those men died for nothing. Oh, why must the world be so cruel? Oh." Otho then decided to end the war and stop the wasting of lives by killing himself, giving the emperorship to Vitellius. Well, that's 2 emperors down, and it's only April. Soon after Otho's death, Vitellius arrived in Rome, and the Senate proclaimed him emperor. This man only lasted 6 months! So the main thing you need to know about Vitellius is that he was really fat. Like, disgustingly obese. Other than that, he was a pretty lousy emperor. He spent tons of the state's money on himself and his public image, which must have done wonders to the failing economy. The economy actually got so bad that Vitellius started resorting to inviting rich men for dinner, only to have them murdered and take all their wealth. He did make 2 somewhat good decisions as emperor though. He allowed equites to become civil servants, and, quote, Vitellius ended the practice of centurions settling furloins and exemptions of duty to their men. Whatever that means. Vitellis also really hated astrologers for some reason. I mean, can't blame him. Oh, also, Sporus just killed himself for reasons that I can't get into or else YouTube would take this video down. Look it up in your own time if you really care that much. But aside from all the, unfavorable circumstances, Vitellis had a calm and long reign ahead of him. Right? Yeah, nope. You see, while the western provinces were cool with Vitellis, the east was not! They couldn't stand the idea of having a fat degenerate as their emperor. Vitellis disgusted them. Fortunately, they had the perfect candidate to replace him with Vespasian. Vespasian was popular with the army and was likable enough to make a fine ruler. He was perfect emperor material. Me? Emperor? I can't be emperor. I don't even like politics. Come on, Dad. I feel like you'd make a great emperor. Agreed. Plus, remember that prophecy I told you? It's all coming together. Do it. Do it. Do it. Alright. I'll do it. Vespasian was proclaimed emperor by his legions in early July. Soon, most eastern provinces jumped on board. Vespasian made a quick ally in the governor of Syria, Mucianus, who had many veteran legions on him and was ordered to march to Italy. Before Vespasian left, he handed command of the Judean army to Titus. Now look here, son. I told Josephus that when I become emperor, Judaism is still going to be allowed. So don't do anything stupid like sack Jerusalem or anything. Okay, Dad. I won't. So Vespasian set off to the province of Egypt, where the locals also proclaimed him emperor. Now, my dear viewer, you might be wondering, why did Vespasian stop at Egypt? Why didn't he just march straight to Rome? Well, I'll tell you why. It was so he could cut the North African grain supply to Rome. Why? To make the population riot, of course. And riot, they did. Meanwhile, Mucianus started his long march from Syria all the way to Rome. But in the end, he would never make it. Because he wouldn't have to. So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I just came here to tell you that there's a coup going on, and I was interested to know if you were interested in participating. Woo! Finally, some action! Let's go! See, I told you should have kept this guy in mind. Primus, sick of not doing anything, joined the war on the side of Vespasian, beginning to march to Rome. Vitellis, by now completely losing his mind, went with Caecina to meet Primus in battle. Just Caecina, by the way, as Fabius had died of his illness like a week ago. Actually, never mind, Vitellis did go by himself, as Caecina betrayed him and tried to switch sides to Primus, but was caught and jailed. Whoops. Both armies met in the same place Vitellis had beaten Otho back in April, beginning the Second Battle of Bedriacum. The battle was brutal, and it dragged on and on and on, well into the night. As a sleep-deprived Primus led his troops, it wasn't long before you noticed. It was a new day. The sun was rising. Now, the thing was that Primus's army had campaigned in Syria. Some of his troops might even have been Syrian. And back in Syria, they had a custom where they would cheer the rising sun. Primus's army had adopted this custom for themselves. Alright, men. Y'all know the drill by now. Are you ready? Ready! Praise the sun! Praise the sun! What are they doing up there? They must be cheering on reinforcements! Retreat! Alright now. Everyone, to battle! Hello? Where did everyone... What? Fearing that all the cheering was for reinforcements, Vitellis and his army fled the battle, making the Second Battle of Bedriacum one of the most anticlimactic battles in history. Invigorated by their victory, Primus's troops, behind his back, rewarded themselves by looting the nearby town of Cremona. Whoops. After that slight embarrassment, Primus continued to march to Rome. Vitellius, now back in Rome, tried to calm down the panicky masses, but to no avail. He then tried to slow down Primus by sending some Vestal virgins his way, but that did nothing. What was he even trying to accomplish here? It wasn't long before Primus marched on Rome itself, where he had to put down the now very riotous masses. In the chaos, one of his soldiers set fire to the Temple of Jupiter, one of the holiest sites in Rome. Whoops. Vitellius tried to disguise himself and hide in the Imperial Palace, but it wasn't long before the obese emperor was caught. Vitellius proceeded to be stripped, beaten, dragged across the streets to be mocked by the masses, and finally beheaded. His mutilated corpse would be later disposed of in the Tiber River.
What the? Ew! What is that? Get that out of here!
Finally, in December 69 AD, the Senate proclaimed Vespasian emperor, bringing this years-long chaos, finally, to an end. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into Vespasian's reign, as this video is long enough as is, but to keep it brief, Vespasian was a pretty solid emperor. I would even go as far as to put him up there with the top 10 best emperors. He did much during his 10-year reign. He fixed the crumbling economy by passing many new economic reforms, which included putting a tax on urine, by the way. He reversed outdated laws, expanded Roman rule in Britain, and even started construction on the Colosseum. Also, after he supposedly used divine powers to heal some plebs, like many emperors before him, Vespasian was deified as a god after his death. But for now, that's that. Vespasian was made emperor, and Titus was made heir. Speaking of which, let's check up on how Titus is doing over in Judea. I feel like my father told me something. So, don't do anything stupid, like sack Jerusalem or anything. Okay, Dad. I won't. Oh.